Thank you, and I would say as a mother, my hands are never full, right? Like, we learn to juggle it all. And this is Ilhan. I don't know. You should wave. My princess, she's much younger than my older ones, and she always says, God sent me to you so I can bring you joy, and she truly does, so it's good to have her here. And again, it's also just really incredible to be able to share a stage with people who inspire me and make me feel strong every single day. So thank you all for being my strong. So I think there's a couple of things that people should really understand about what this current debate is really about. And why a default on in our country would be just really devastating economically. We've never defaulted as a country since we've existed. We've come close many a times, but cooler heads have always prevailed. We've always decided to pay our bills. And this is, I think, the first time that a lot of us are actually worried about whether we have cooler heads in the room to be able to prevail on behalf of our country. The debt ceiling has been raised about a little more than 70 times over the history of our country. Over 50% of those times has been raised during a Republican presidency. During the Trump presidency, we raised it 3 times without any strings attached. Because most of us understand that as a country, we always spend a little bit more than we bring in, and we budget that way. And there's always been a shared, I think, understanding that we have to pay the bills when they come due. That's what any responsible human being does. And we have to be responsible on behalf of our country as leaders in this country. But what the Republicans currently are doing is trying, I believe, run the clock. We are projected to default somewhere between June 1st to June 9th. And that is somewhere between 8 days and 2 weeks. To continue to have a conversation with Republicans who are, some saying, there's nothing to negotiate on. We gave you a list, you just have to sign. Some are saying, we don't actually believe there is such thing as defaulting. Let's just see what happens. And for those of us who are worried about what it looks like to just see what happens, we can see just the economic horrors that this country and the world would experience. So for our country right now, it means that there would be a jump to unemployment up to 8%. Right? We have one of the lowest unemployment rates in our nation's history. So defaulting, even a short-term default, a few weeks, a month, would increase unemployment to 8%. It means a 4% drop in GDP. It means checks to seniors, their Social Security checks, would stop. It means veterans will not get their benefits. It means people who rely on Head Start to get their kids a fighting chance will not have that access. It means that air traffic controllers will no longer exist. So that means there's not going to be airplanes. Travel will halt. And I just want people to understand, right? Like Medicaid, Medicare, like all of the essential needs that we have as a country will slowly and surely not be met. So think about the senior that their only income is that Social Security check. That means they don't receive that check, rent is not paid. Many people get kicked out of their homes if they don't pay their rent. And so we are going to see an increase of people who are going to be unhoused. And once you have the kind of catastrophe just here in this country economically, you are going to threaten all the markets. So there is a ripple effect for the global economy as well. And as we just talked about with COVID, the initial impact of it exposed the level of inequality and access to resources that existed in this country. Now, think about that happening intentionally. Because of COVID, we had to stop a lot of things. And a lot of people were impacted, but we didn't have a way to stop it. So there was almost, as Alex was saying, just this desire to try to do everything we can to make sure people were made whole again. What is happening now is an evil act. It's Republicans saying, we are going to do all of these things to you. And I don't know if there will be a coming together of wanting to stop, right? The harm people are experiencing. So even with a short-term default, the lasting impacts of that and families recovering from that is going to take generations. That is why we've never defaulted as a country. And I think because Republicans are so good at diluting the conversation, we've also have been struggling, right? Because they've got all kinds of media outlets that just repeat and give people access to their messaging, that many people don't understand that there is two conversations that need to happen. One is a conversation on how do we stop default. The other is a budgetary conversation that happens during appropriation session. So we can have the conversations about what should be cut, like fiscal responsibility, all kinds of things. But to bring that conversation, future spending, into a conversation about what we spend in the past and the bills that are due, is as if you negotiating with your landlord when your bill is due at the end of the month and say, I'm only going to pay my rent if you give me a cut on the next month. Like, nobody here has ever had conversations, you know, if you even like, what McCarthy uses the credit card analogy, you know, it's the silliest. I mean, and it sort of tells you, right, like they have considered this idea that the American people are fools to constantly talk to them as they are like the stupidest people on earth. Because to say, you know, like if you reach the limit on your credit card, you know, it's the same as us defaulting. It's like, it's a most ridiculous analogy. Because when you reach the limit on your credit card, you have two options. One is to pay the freaking bill, and the second option is to beg for more money so that you can raise the limit. Like, are we in like 5? I mean, Ilhan could probably explain this, right? And so like this idea that somehow we've reached our credit limit and we're going to choose to not pay the bill, and we're going to choose not to raise the limit, and like magically there are going to be some results. Like, where do the results appear from? So I just want like for us to start having honest conversations about the irresponsibility of Republicans, their inability to actually lead, the way in which they are holding our economy, the global economy, hostage, and the kind of lasting damage that even if we were to default short term, will have on our country and the world for generations to come.